All right, guys, I'm back here with Behrens. He's a leadership guru, and a lot of work he has done in the leadership world. And he was the one who is the creator of the CAL courses and also refactoring the CAL courses. And I have read lots of his material, and that's what really helped me teach the CAL courses now in the new world and the new certifications. And I'm eager to really listen to what he's going to say, right? So stay tuned. And now, Pete, thank you so much for coming and joining us, and from US all the way to India virtually. And so it's all yours, Pete. You can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Nanda, for first of all your great story, and also I just want to thank Vijay and Suresh for helping to organize this event, and obviously the Scrum Alliance for sponsoring this event. And thank you for joining us. My name is Pete Behrens, coming from Boulder, Colorado, to you. And today we have a talk on scaling Agile mindsets over practices. And Nanda mentioned a few things with regard to me. For those of you that don't know me, I'll just highlight a couple of things. One is my background is engineering. And some people ask me, well, how did you get into leadership development and coaching from engineering? And it's an interesting kind of journey. But one of the things I see myself doing today is, in a sense, still doing engineering, but rather than technical systems that I spent many years on developing data systems and computer systems, today I feel like I'm focused on solving people systems and optimizing people systems. And if you know about anything about engineering, it's about optimizing systems. And I find people systems to be very fascinating problems to help solve, and helping leaders do that as well. So that's a little bit of my background. As Nanda said, I've helped create a few of the Scrum Alliance programs. First of all, in 2007 with a certified enterprise coaching program, a lot of which you're dealing with here, the CTC, CEC type programs. And then a few years ago in 2016, helped develop the Certified Agile Leadership Program, which is where I spend most or all of my time today, and coming to you with a message around the importance of leadership and why this is such a important step for you to be aware of. So I've got some social media links there. Feel free to social media connect to me and share your thoughts on this presentation. Also, during this talk, we do have an interactive system to some degree. I recognize I'm not there. I'd love to be there and have some offline chats with you, but let's try to connect as much as possible. I do have a couple of points. This is not a 45-minute talk through. I've got 2 break points, in which case I'm going to ask you to reflect on a couple of questions, but also I encourage you to ask questions along the way. So I've asked Nanda to curate some of those questions as we go. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask those, respond and share perspectives, and respond to others if that helps to you as well. Do that. So look forward to engage a bit that we can online here. But let's jump in. First of all, we want to recognize, and this has been true for as long as I've been working in the Agile world, for about 20 years now, the benefits of Agile are real. And this coming from the 14th CollabNet State of Agility report, that many organizations are finding tremendous value from using Agile ways of working. And this is why you're seeing such vast adoption across the globe, and that's true. And I want to be careful as I might criticize some things. What I'm not trying to do is say Agile is wrong or bad. And obviously it's real, it's effective, and especially as you look at the COVID responses, the needs for companies to adapt has obviously become very critical in their success. But we also recognize that the barriers, the challenges organizations are facing are just as real. And this is, again, year over year. And in fact, this year was a significant change in the results. And I found that to be quite fascinating. Every year for 13 years, culture has been at the top of the heap. In fact, it's always been over 50% as a respondent saying culture has been one of the largest impediments towards agile ways of working. And so I was kind of taken aback this year when I saw this report and said, culture's dropped. Does that mean we're making a dent? Does that mean we're actually doing something? And I'm getting a sense, I don't know if they're yet, I'm still trying to fill this out, but I think we might be making a dent in culture, and we're going to be getting on that. But what has risen to the top and has been there right under the surface for every year as well is this resistance to change. Like, what does it mean to change? Yes, we know every organization has to change. Agile is all about change, but I don't want to change. Our organization can't change. We're just so set in our ways. And again, that's an element of culture. And what you'll notice here is 4 out of the top 5 impediments and barriers to Agile still relate to leadership, still relate to the organization capacity. And that's what I'm going to be getting at here today. So the premise here is that we have a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the way we're scaling Agile and agility that organizations need. And I believe the scaling frameworks have become kind of this go-to, this very simple solution that many leaders and organizations are attaching on to. I want to do SAFe or less or Scrum at scale, and I'm not going to pick on any particular one there, but just they've been kind of an easy go-to solution. Yet I don't see them as delivering the outcomes that most organizations are expecting, or maybe led to believe in many ways about what they can do for the organization. And so I want to get behind that a little bit and maybe analyze a little bit maybe why that is, but also what can we do. And so let's just pick on a couple, and I'm going to start with my home base, Scrum. And, we have people in our community, and this is a book by Jeff Sutherland, one of the founders of Scrum, twice the work in half the time. And, so he's claiming a 4x, 4 times productivity response of using Scrum. And I don't discount Jeff's results. I'm not suggesting he doesn't see those results. My thinking on this is he's cherry picking case studies on what we'd call the right-hand side of the bell curve of all results. And I'll get to that here in a second. But, Scrum at Scale is not alone in looking at, productivity. We start to look at SAFe, and on the SAFe's website, Scaled Agile Framework, they have, 30 to 75% faster time to market. They have 10 to 50% increased employee engagement. 25 to 75% increase in productivity. Wouldn't we all want that? And 20 to 50% improvements in quality. So these are quite, again, dramatic claims. And I'm not here to say they're wrong. I'm not here to say they haven't seen those. But when we look at, again, the overall results, how do they compare? And so a recent study suggests that 12% gain is closer to the norm when it comes to productivity and improved responsiveness to market. And in fact, when you scale that into larger organizations, it drops to about a 5% gain, which is still a positive result, which is still, okay, Agile's driving effectiveness, but not matching quite the claims. And this comes from a quantitative analysis done in 2017. You can go ahead and look on InfoQ for that particular result. But again, what I'm trying to recognize here is what's being sold is essentially what I believe is some of the outliers of success, where the norm in most organizations, what they're seeing is, yeah, we're getting a little bit of benefit from Agile, but it's not making a fairly substantial dent. And so let's maybe take a look at why. Why is this happening? And if you've heard me talk before, you've probably seen a couple of these slides here, where we start to see what happens when an organization attempts to achieve a little bit more agility. It's usually pretty easy, in fact, to start becoming more agile and saying, all right, let's adopt it on a team or a department or, some aspect of the organization. But then what happens as we start to broaden that? What do? We start to run into the system. We start to run into a lot of the things that are running in the organization that just aren't set up to support Agile. these are roles and responsibilities, departments, divisions, these are budgets, sign-offs, who has authority to do certain things, how are our teams, set up, how do we measure success in the organization and projects? And so what tends to happen is, as Agile bumps into these system elements, what's easier to change? Is it easier to change the system? Not so much. Is it easier to change Agile? Yeah. So what ends up happening is we tend to relabel Agile into the way we do things. And so all of a sudden, all we have is this kind of, we keep doing what we've always done, but now it's Scrum, or now it's, Kanban, or, now you're a product owner, not a product manager, or you're a Scrum master, not a project manager. So we relabel people, we relabel stages, we relabel, teams to squads, things like that. But truly, the system isn't necessarily impacted. Now, how does this happen? What's in a sense happening in this? And this is where we get back to culture and why culture becomes so important. And that is, most organizations take this approach we call outside in. And what I mean by that is we start with the practice of Scrum. We introduce Scrum into a team or organization. We start to operate in these short sprint cycles. And we teach Scrum Masters, and many of you as CTCs or Scrum Masters have been taught, well, we expose impediments and we bust the impediments. And yet, for about 10 years, I was a certified Scrum trainer, and I taught Scrum Masters, and I taught product owners. And I would ask Scrum Masters, okay, what percentage of the impediments your team's running into can you, as a team alone, fix? And every time I'd ask, it's a really, really small number, 5%, 10%, 2%, 0, some would say. And why is that? Because most of the impediments a team runs into are not inside the team. Most of those impediments are in the system. They're things the Scrum Master has no responsibility over. These, again, are the roles, responsibilities. These, again, are, the budgets and approval processes and things like that. And so we get this clash between the way we do things and the way we're trying to do things. And just to give you a metaphor here, and Nanda shared a nice little leadership story. Think of this metaphor as, okay, the system is a vault. That's like a bank vault or a safe, protecting the company's most valued assets. So when we start to think about, okay, in a physical system, like I bought my money, I'm going to have a vault protect my money. In a company, money is important, so they do protect that, but they also protect things like quality, things like predictability. These are values that enable a company to, these are its most valued assets. This is what makes a company successful. So what they do is they build a system to protect those values. And yes, they protect money by budgets and sign-offs. Those are financial systems that protect, that valued asset. But they also have systems like quality assurance and quality control and, audits and all sorts of systems in place to protect quality values and predictability. We have project management and, we have timelines and plans. And so think of the system as being built up a protector of these assets, these values. And Agile, as it's trying to come in here, is bumping into this, in a sense, vault, and it isn't able to break through in that. Now, you might think, all right, this only happens bottom up. And that is true. Teams that try to go bottom up run into the system and leadership isn't quite on board. But I also see this top down. And what I see is leaders delegating an Agile authority to say, hey, go make the company Agile. And they don't take responsibility either. They don't change the system. And they just demand we do things faster. Just demand, we do things quicker. And yet keep everything else the same. I don't have a role in this. And just to bring a final kind of data point to this, we talked a little bit about some of the study from InfoQ there. In 2018, 2019, the Business Agility Institute looked at 440 organizations globally that were embarking on an Agile transformation. And so there's studies here, and I've got both of those listed, both the 2018 report and the 2019 report. And the results are sadly disappointing. When they measure business agility maturity, they're barely at a walking stage. This would be like a toddler learning to walk. Is the way they're describing organizations in their agility effectiveness. Yeah, they are working, but at a level that's not real effective. And 79% have what's called a low business fluency. That means just they might be doing an agile practice, but their ability to adapt as an organization just isn't there yet. 80% aren't there yet. So again, just another data point here that says, all right, we're scaling, we're growing agile in many ways. We're not hitting those key success points. So I've got a question for you. And I encourage people to share via chat. And if you've got a question as well, do this. But with maybe a 1 or 2 word answer, or just a very short answer. How does your organization define success when it's scaling agile? How does your organization define success in scaling agile? Somebody willing to share in the chat window about how you define it. And by the way, if you do have a question, feel free to jump in. Let's see. So Nandan, I don't know if I'm seeing chats or not, or people are not chatting.
They are chatting. You should look at the stage tab.
Yeah, I'm looking at chat. Am I maybe backstage chat or something?
Yeah, you are in the backstage chat probably.
All right, Bhaskar, thanks for chatting in there. Feature adoption by customer. So I like to see the fact that there's a customer connection to your success in scaling. That's very good. One of the things that I often see organizations define success in scaling agile is we have success by how many teams are trained, how many people are trained, how many teams are running in an agile way. These are common ways that we might measure success in scaling is are we scaling when agile starts to become. So providing MVP to a customer, good, Pradeep. Glad to see that we do have some definitions towards that. Now, I've got one other question, maybe a little easier question for you. On a scale of 0 to 10, if you want to throw into chat just a number, 0 to 10, how effective has your organization's agile scaling been on actually improving these business outcomes? So, a couple of you have said how we're measuring success. Is there anybody willing to respond to how your organization is doing in this realm? All right, we've got a low threshold of companies. Yeah, companies never share. Thanks, Guru. So yeah, I did a Scrum Alliance coaching retreat online just last week, and everybody there was happy to share. So it's interesting. We got a slightly different culture here, not willing to share publicly here in this forum. But yeah, thanks for at least let's think about this in terms of how effective is your company at doing this. Well, let's move on to an alternative. Let's talk about what does an alternative look like with response to scaling agile. So what we're looking at here is pretty simple. Let's see. Ebenezer saying there's a lot of responses in the stage chats. Yeah, see, maybe I don't know that I'm allowed to see the stage. Oh, there's stage. Oh, events and stage. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I was looking at the event chat, not the stage chat. Got it. There are a lot of comments. Thank you for for all the sharing. Okay, so let me just back up for just a second here. Appreciate I'm getting lost in hop in, it looks like. Okay. Thanks for all these numbers. These are great. They're sad though a little bit. I'm seeing a lot of numbers of, one, Deepak, sorry about that, Deepak. I know you work with a number of organizations, a 2, a 0 in there, but I do see some positive results. I do see Shrikant, Vamshi, 8s, 7s, that's good. So we are seeing some positivity there. And I don't know if I've seen all the previous results, but thanks for connecting me a little bit better. So Miss I'm saying, okay, Pete, there's a bombardment of your queries. Tell us how much people are engaged in your talk. You are a guru. Thanks, Miss I'm. Appreciate the sharing there. So what I am seeing is we are starting to see some pretty strong success in organizations' ability to meet these new business outcomes. But what's interesting is I think to some degree I'm speaking to what we call the choir. I'm speaking to those of you that know this. And what is often the biggest challenge here is how do we get this to others? How do we get this to the people that are in charge? Because the thing I hear more than often than not is my manager needs to hear this. They're not at this conference. My manager needs to hear this. And so how are we doing that in a sense of what does an alternative look like? Well, the premise is quite simple. Train and coach leaders to create an engaged workforce to imbue true agency. Now, what I mean by true agency is leaders own or leaders take charge of agility as a verb, agility as a capacity, and provide the workforce with basic training and coaching for a growth mindset. So what we're saying is we're teaching people to fish. We're not just giving them the fish to eat. It's that old metaphor of how do you enable success long term? You've got to enable the education. And so just as we've been teaching Scrum, in fact, I did that for 10 years teaching Scrum. I gave that up because I realized Scrum isn't the problem. Scrum is fairly easy in the realm of problems. What's problem is the culture of the organization and leaders not understanding. And leaders most often than not don't go to a Scrum class, and they don't go to a Scrum Master class or a product owner class. And in fact, most of the topics for them in those classes aren't even really pertinent to them. How to do Scrum. That's not really that relevant. But what is relevant is helping leaders understand a growth mindset. What does that mean? And so what we attempt to do here is we attempt to kind of turn the table. And what I mean by that is we don't come in and say, let's do a culture transformation. Let's put posters on the wall. That's not that meaningful. That doesn't change. In fact, culture doesn't change, very quickly, in many organizations, even within a decade, sometimes culture is hard to change. But what we can do is we can hack into what is our culture. Who are we as an organization? And we can help leaders understand their role in that culture, in what they're trying to do. And then leaders can start to then both model this as well as then start to break or define some of these systems. Now, what I want to recognize here is this does not require a massive reorganization. I'm not suggesting we have to go in and reorganize roles, responsibilities, teams, all that. No. Now, oftentimes we do. Oftentimes leaders will. That's great, but that's not where we start. What we do is we actually start with awareness. Okay, let's teach leaders about some new ways of thinking. And this becomes quite personal. We don't teach, and this is what I get frustrated by a lot of Agile leadership education. It's teaching leaders what Agile is. That's not what we need to teach leaders. We need to teach leadership that enables agility, values like transparency, openness, feedback. And so we got to teach leadership. And so that's what we're trying to do here is we're trying to teach leaders to think and act differently. This is personal. This is you. How you show up makes a difference in the culture. And yes, we do teach them system tools, how to change and tweak the organization. But again, what we're not doing is teaching them safe, teaching them Scrum at scale, teaching them less. They can learn that. That's great. These are complementary skills. What we're teaching them are what's behind those that make those effective in their organization. And so we're hacking in on the system and saying, okay, if we want to scale Agile ways of working in an organization, we have to start to change leaders in the way they think and behave. We have to start to break down some of those system areas and then grow through time. Now, from a standpoint, what I want you to be kind of careful of, and this is one of those that I see happen often, and it comes into that the previous question I asked about how do you measure success for Agile? Well, a lot of Agile success is measured by, are we doing Agile? And this is, to me, one of these transformation traps. Agile becomes the goal. Agile should not be the goal. In fact, if any leader comes to me and says, Pete, we want to be Agile, we want to do safe, we want to go this way, we want to do, my first question is why? What's our goal? Do we have a problem we're trying to solve? Is there an opportunity in the business we're trying to hit that we haven't hit? So there's a why behind this, that we got to connect it to the business. So Agile or agility becomes the means to improve that dimension of the organization. Maybe it's to improve customer and response. Maybe it's to improve employee engagement. Maybe it's to improve quality. But those are business factors, not Agile. We need Agile to accomplish those things. In fact, then to do that, people and culture become the key factors to the success. So if we don't start with leaders, Agile is going to fail. Stop right there. If we don't start with leaders, Agile will fail. And I've seen this dozens of times. If we can't get leaders to understand their role, it's going to fail. Now, let's just take a brief pause here and just talk about this concept, because I've mentioned leadership and I've mentioned culture. And what I want you to think about is leadership and culture are essentially two sides of the same coin. Edgar Schein, I'll put his book right here. I've got it next to me. He's got a 400-page book, Guru in Culture, right? I'm not a guru in culture. I'm a reader of culture and a coach in culture. Edgar Schein, in that 400-page book, if I boil that 400 pages down to one metaphor, it's saying these two concepts, leadership and culture, are symbiotic. You can't separate one from the other. And in fact, in many organizations, leadership, when it starts, the company starts, it's formed by the leader's mindset, the leader's personality. If the leader's outgoing, we got an outgoing company. If the leader's, a micromanager, you have a very meticulous, operation. And that's what happens in startups. Now, over time, we recognize that culture starts to overtake leadership, and culture starts to, as we bring new leaders in, there's already a culture in place. And so we can't necessarily separate these two. So if we want to change culture, we need to change leaders. But yet that's the hardest thing to do, to change culture. But yet what we're going to talk about and share with you is it's actually not that hard. Some people think, oh, we can't change culture. Yes, you can. Everybody can shape culture. Now, we recognize the CEOs shape culture, but what I'm going to actually say is don't wait for the CEO. That's a pretty rare event. For a CEO to adopt an agile way of working, it will happen on small companies, no doubt. We got a lot of those. Will happen in medium-sized companies. Even we've seen a couple on the large companies take agile ways of working. The problem with this in most organizations, especially for healthcare and transportation and banking and insurance, and take all of these risk-based types of industries, the CEO is not going to be going in this direction anytime soon. So it happens somewhere below. And my guess is most of you here, 99% of you here, are not a CEO of a large company. Now, if we got one, great. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're here, super. Most of you and most of the people that I work with and our organization works with come somewhere in the middle. I'm a Scrum Master. I'm an architect. I'm director, VP. I'm in the system. And in fact, what we find is these are the perfect places to shape culture. Everybody shapes culture. But let me share a little bit about how this works. So first of all, let's use a metaphor for culture. So I talked about the coin. Okay, leadership and culture are the same thing. Another way to view culture is like saying, okay, if our organization is made up of people, think of culture being the shadow. okay, the reflection of how those people think and act. Now, when I think about if I want to change a shadow, how do I do that? I've got two choices. Number one, I could change the light source and say, okay, well, let me change the light, but that's pretty hard. And metaphorically speaking, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But number two, it's pretty easy to change your shadow. You just move, just shift. And that's really what we start to say is, okay, if I want to change culture, I got to just change me. Now, we've said this, large leaders, big leaders, top leaders, cast big shadows. Now, take someone like Microsoft. Okay, now here's a fascinating case study that when you look at Microsoft over the past, 30, 40 years of its existence, for half of that time, Bill Gates ran Microsoft and did some awesome things in terms of growing that company. What I want to focus on is the next two leaders that came through Microsoft, Steve Ballmer and Satya Nadella. And there was this large handoff, this very pomp and circumstance, kind of like a king blessing the new prince. Bill Gates, blessing Steve Ballmer in this multi-year handoff to take the reins of Microsoft. And Steve Ballmer did some good things for Microsoft. Steve Ballmer was the one who kind of created the emphasis on cloud technology. In fact, that's where Satya Nadella, cut a lot of his wings, is building up that cloud technology. Steve Ballmer, was able to continue a lot of the Microsoft legacy and what was going on. But at the same time, Steve Ballmer enabled a culture that was quite dysfunctional. That was quite difficult. And I've spoken to a lot of people at Microsoft over the years that have worked under these various leaders and talk about, Steve Ballmer's this rah, go kind of leader, getting everybody going, hyper competitive. And it showed up in his strategy, fighting Google and Apple and Amazon and Facebook. And, they're fighting everybody. And in the early days, that competitive spirit, they were winning. They beat Apple, they beat, many of, IBM and many of the players who were trying to compete. They beat Netscape, in the early wars of browsers, they won the desktop platform. They won the Office platform. They did all those things. But you know what? They started to lose. They lost the mobile. They lost tablet. They lost the the services, the server service market for against all these competitors, and so this culture under Bill Gates that worked really well. Steve Ballmer was challenged, extremely challenged. Now, 5 years ago, Satya Nadella comes based in India, worldly, driven in a sense of his growth, comes in and significantly changes the culture. And I encourage you to, if you haven't, he's got a great book, hit refresh, Satya Nadella. Now, it's probably not the best written book in the world, and I'll take that. But what I love about this book is two things. He talks a lot about his cloud stuff, his technology, and things like that. You might appreciate that as a technical person. But what he talks about is an event in his life that changed his parenthood, that then changed his leadership. And what he talks about is he was raised with a very strong mentality that we push our kids to achieve. We push, go. You're going to be a doctor. I think his parents were still upset he's not a doctor. And fairly typical India culture of, you're going to be successful. And yet his child was born with special needs and realized that level of parenting doesn't work with a special needs child. And it required Satya Nadella to have a lot of rethinking about the way he parents, which changed a lot of the way he thinks about the way he leads. And if you look at Microsoft today, it's probably one of the largest turnaround stories in the world, in the tech world, of culture. We've gone from a competitive fight everybody to a collaborative, why are we fighting Apple? They have some of the best platforms. Why isn't Office running on my iPhone or my iPad? And so Satya Nadella pulled back and said, why aren't we being more collaborative in our space? Just as Nanda's saying, it goes from a me to a we to an us. Microsoft was switching their culture from a me, as a Microsoft, to a we, hey, wait, we have partners, to an us. And Satya Nadella is doing this personally, and how that his shadow is casting over a huge organization who is now outpacing the likes of Apple and Amazon's and others in the world, and becoming one of the largest, growth organizations in the world. And so this is how, yes, we can have these huge stories. And we want to recognize and reward and just praise people like Satya Nadella, who have taken the step and done some amazing things. Yet, I want to focus on you, because while a large leader, a top leader, casts a big shadow, smaller leaders, lower leaders in the organization, cast what we call acute shadows. And what I mean by that is your shadow is more direct. Your shadow is sharper. Your shadow is impacting people more directly. And in fact, if you ask most people why they leave an organization, it's not because the CEO, it's because their manager, their leader is working or not working in a particular way. And so highlighting an individual, just as we highlighted Satya Nadella, let me highlight Travis. Now, you guys don't know Travis. I didn't know Travis before a few years ago. Travis has not written a book. Travis does not run a company. Travis is a leader in an organization just like you. He happens to be here in the United States, working with an organization that is focused on financial services. And Travis joined us on one of our programs in the Agile Leadership Journey, and was really fascinated with some of the things he was learning in terms of his leadership. And then joined us on what we call our practice program, in which case he spent another year with us to practice some of the techniques that we're talking about when we talk about scaling mindsets. And this is the note Travis received from a senior leader in the organization. It says, Travis, Stephen Covey once said, I am personally convinced that one person can be a change catalyst, a transformer in any situation, any organization. Such an individual is yeast that can leaven an entire loaf. It requires vision, initiative, patience, respect, persistence, courage, faith to be a transforming leader. You have been a change catalyst for our organization. You had the vision for Agile work teams. You influenced the CEO and the executive team. You executed the vision and transformed the way we work. As a result, our organization is more resilient to change and able to adapt to an increasingly dynamic world. This is what we mean by scaling mindsets and behaviors. This is how a single individual can influence an organization from anywhere inside that organization. And yeah, Travis didn't do this alone. Travis was a catalyst enabling the organization to do what was already there. He just had the tools and the capacity to impact this. And this was a handwritten note. This is not something that was sent via email, which is why I kind of cut and paste this in here as just a fascinating connection to how a single individual can make a dramatic difference in an organization. And I'm hopeful you know some catalysts like Travis. So the disconnect. Scaling frameworks have become the go-to, but they're not meeting the needs. Scaling mindsets and values is a different way to go. And it allows an organization to become more agile with any scaling framework or none at all. And that's really what we're looking at here, is not replacing them, but adding to them. So I've got a couple of questions for you. And Nanda or whoever else is curating any questions, if there weren't any questions that came up, I'd appreciate that. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd like maybe some other answers here. How engaged have your senior, and I'll say senior being not necessarily your CEO, but maybe on top of your part of the organization, your most senior execs in your division, department, whatever. How are they been? How engaged are they in shaping your agile ways of working? Well, it's good to see a couple of early responses here, Anand, and got some 6s and 7s and 8s. I like that. It's good to see. Oh, some positive responses. There's a couple of 1s and 2s and 3s. Well, that's interesting. I'm actually seeing maybe potentially some higher numbers here than the first case. And maybe we've got the first step, which is leaders are being engaged and involved. By the way, if there is a question, feel free to write it. Hopefully, it won't scroll through too quickly. CTO is supporting. Great, Miss M. We'll report that back to your CTO that you gave him or her a good grade. So here's the second question. What do you wish leaders would do more or less of to be better at scaling agile ways of working? What's one or two words? What do you wish that they would do more or less that would make it more effective? Yeah, less micromanagement. Give up control. That's one of the big ones. A lot of leaders will ask me, Pete, how do I tell people to do stuff without telling them what to do? How do I get people to do things without telling them what to do? That's one of the things we try to teach. Supportive, micromanagement, transparency, empowerment. These are great. Hopefully we can save this chat and curate this data. I don't know, Nanda, whether you have access to save out this chat window, but I'd love to be able to get a copy of this later, and then we can do some analysis. Unlearn. I like that. Rikesha. Sorry, I said that wrong. Yeah. Pull versus push. A little bit of lean. Yeah. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So what I want to do now is just, okay, what can we do about this? So I think we've got a few more minutes here, and so I've got a third part to this, but I want you to start to think about your questions too. Nanda, is there a question or anything you'd like to pull in here? No, I think I don't hear you, Nanda, so I don't know if that's me. So I'll keep going since I'm not hearing you. So I just want to share a little bit about what we're doing in the Agile leadership journey to help address this. Like I said, I've been a Scrum trainer and coach for many years. My focus right now is teaching leaders, number one, coaching leaders, but actually building a community, a scaling community, in fact, where we're scaling mindsets, not practices. And we use a compass to kind of guide the way we think and work. And so this is what we call the Agile Leadership Compass. And the reason I like this compass is it gives leaders, in a sense, how to think about this. And, we often see leaders focus and kind of just to show you this in a maybe visual sense. Most leaders, when they think about Agile, focus in the bottom right quadrant, this value delivery quadrant. Hey, we got to go faster. Let's go. Let's get this out. We got to meet our customer needs, and that's true. A lot of organizations, that's how you define value. The problem is if you jump right to that solution, what you end up doing is you end up driving a lot of dysfunctional behavior. In a sense, we start to optimize towards a particular variable that we might be missing something else. So what do? We actually start up here. We teach leadership. And we say, okay, what does it mean to actually have a growth mindset and what we call catalyst habits? How do you start to become a catalyst in your organization? And through that way, what we start to do is start to say, okay, through a growth mindset, we can start to impact these Agile values, which impacts the delivery of the organizational system in a more holistic way. It's a little slower, but it's more authentic. It's more what we call true agency, in a sense of leaders are part of the system. I'm not coming in as a coach, imparting Agile and then leaving like, oh, I'm coming in and teaching leadership, helping them understand, okay, what is a growth mindset? That's something that can stick with them for quite a while. So how this works is essentially we have what we call microculture and macroculture. And so the microculture is this top, because what we say is if we want Agile organizations at the bottom, leaders have to reflect this first. So again, the shadow metaphor, if you want the agile organization, you have to have agile leaders. So what we teach leadership is we say, all right, you have a job here. Somebody asked a question, Vinod said, what course would you recommend for senior leadership who's responsible for delivering, but not involved in Scrum? Well, that's exactly what our class is doing here. It's teaching agile leadership. So I encourage you to look at the agile leadership journey. We have about 35 guides globally now starting to teach. In India, one of our partners, Jay Prakash Patswami is one of our agile leadership journey guides, and we're bringing in more guides as we grow. But what we do is we teach leaders, first of all, what does it mean for me? And what's fascinating about this, and in a sense, we help leaders become more creative. Now, if you think about agility, one of the things that's actually interesting is an agile mind is a creative mind. It's able to think differently. It's just able to think a new thought. And that's agility in thinking. And so we start to connect the dots of, wait a second, what does agile mean in the context of a person as a leader? And so we work through this mode of helping leaders understand how they think impacts their roles. Most leaders operate in what we call an expert mindset. What we mean by this is they focus on the work. They focus on, coding or documents or presentations, things like that, spreadsheets. And what we do is we start to help leaders recognize, wait a second, as a more effective leader, we can start to focus on how others are working. This is what we call the achiever leader. And I won't go into a lot of the details here, but achiever leaders focus on customers and projects and budgets and getting teams to work together to solve goals. They're incredibly powerful leaders. But what we say is an achiever leader is more agile. Why? Because an achiever leader isn't just a new leader. It's a new layer of leadership that all of a sudden now as a leader, I've got two ways of working. I can operate in my achiever realm and focus on customers and projects, but I can also dive down and focus on work and do some work if need be. I've got an expert inside of me in a sense. I've got a new shell. We look at these are like Russian nesting dolls, but then we don't stop there. And this is about 90% of leaders fit into these two categories. But when we start to hack in on what's agile, transparency, openness, feedback, those don't start to get engaged until we start to see what's called a catalyst leader, yet another layer of leadership that starts to focus on people, culture, the human dimension. It also starts to focus on themselves in terms of, hey, I'm more self-aware. I'm able to adapt. I'm able to change. I'm able, this is where I can start to give up control. When you start to say, hey, I want to get away from micromanaging, the agility shift is starting to be here. But what we want to be careful of is this is not servant leadership. This is not, just soft leadership. This is very agitating, challenging, change agent leadership. And that's what we use the word catalyst when we start to focus on this. Now, this comes from book Leadership Agility by Bill Joyner, and we use this reference here to help leaders mature and develop, not just build new skills. And then we have a whole system for culture on the organization system side. So we have tools on both of these sides, and I won't go into too much of the details of this one. But one of the things I want you to recognize is as we think about organizations, oftentimes we think, well, it's a single value set. Agile's a certain value set. Agile's more creativity and innovation. Well, no, Agile's discipline. Agile's teamwork. Agile's about delivering fast. When we think about a value system, we teach something called the competing values framework. All of those things are good. Yet they all compete with each other. Being predictable in quality competes against innovation and creativity. Doing things together as a team and connected competes sometimes against speed and getting things done quickly and adapting. So these are going to fight, yet they're all agile. And so agility isn't a value set. Agility is the ability to change your value set and the ability for an organization to adapt. And so what we talk about is we shape our culture both through who we are so we can be agile and adaptive, but our organization can too. So I'm going to pause there in a sense, and Nanda, I'll let you come back out if we can get some Q&A and if there's some ways to get some questions out here. As you're getting that set up, We do have, so somebody asked about a class. So we do have what we call our awareness workshops. These are workshops kind of like a Scrum Master class where, we do these in person or online, and we try to create very small classes here. It's all interactive, engaged. But then we also have our practice programs, which case we're taking leaders through actually doing these things. We run these publicly and privately. So Nanda, and by the way, our leadership journey, we're always looking for guides. So if you've been a leader, if you have some background in Agile, we are looking for people that would like to be guides in our system, teaching other leaders how to do this. So Nanda, is there some questions out here? I'm still not hearing you. Could be me, but I'm not hearing you. So I'm going to jump in here since I'm not hearing Nanda. When leaders talk, so this comes from Satish, when leaders talk about transforming or scaling practices, they want this to happen with their teams and always remain outside of the system. How can we engage leaders in the system? Since considering there are no leadership roles mentioned in any scaling frameworks. Well, I would disagree with that. I think there are leadership roles like in SAFe and Scrum at Scale. They do have leadership role. I mean, Scrum Master is a leadership role. Product owner is a leadership role. Release train engineer is a leadership role. There are leadership roles in the scaling frameworks. But again, these are just titles, I look at SAFe and in fact, Dean Leffingwell took my leadership module that I was teaching part of this curriculum, probably 8-10 years ago, and put in a little 2-hour module in SAFe. So they give lip service to it. Oh, you should have a growth mindset, or you should think about lean thinking. But it's not changing leader behavior. This requires a little bit more focus. So what we encourage that's why we call it an awareness workshop. I believe most leaders have good intent. I believe most leaders want the best thing for the organization. They want to succeed. There's a lot of pressure. In fact, I would say most leaders feel the sense of pressure, right, to meet, organizational goals. So they're doing their best. I think there's a lot they just don't know. And what we do is to try to open those eyes. We open a new door. We basically show them a new way of thinking that's like, I didn't look at Agile this way. In fact, this wasn't an Agile class. This is a leadership class. And so that's one of the biggest comments we get here is about the fact that, this is a new way to be a leader where I don't have to micromanage, yet I can still be engaged. I don't have to tell people what to do, yet I'm still creating direction for my organization. Nanda, I'm hearing a little bit of sound.
Yeah, could you hear me now?
There we go.
There was some technical glitch. So I think the biggest contention in India is what I noticed, as well as a lot of people are asking here, is, okay, the ground level staff are getting trained. Most of the people in this conference probably are Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, maybe some managers at the lower level. So the biggest contention is the leadership. Even you talk about the VP level or director level, they're not interested in really going to even these classes. So the question is there any practical way for somebody, an Agile coach or maybe a mid-level manager, to influence up? Like how can we create that hunger in the senior management that, okay, this is something I have to do. All my leadership people need to do this. How do we do that? Like, because this is the biggest problem with the transformations in India, especially. Most of the people come to my class too are the mid-level and ground level people, and their biggest question is, we can't do anything here.
Yeah, so, and that's where that's why when we teach leadership, we start with the personal side of leadership here, and we start to say, okay, as a leader, you can change you. That's the only thing. It's the Gandhi quote of be the change you want to see in the world. We literally take that to action here. A primary focus of we just change you. Okay, so that means you're a coach. Well, you're going to coach different. You're a leader, a director, or a manager. You're going to lead different. So until you start with you, nothing else will change. So can you influence up? Yes. Every leader that we've worked with has not been the top. In fact, when I teach CEOs, and I've had a few CEOs in our class, or senior suite leaders who are at the very top, and I think, okay, we're finally done with this. Like, my leader needs to hear about this, right? Because they're in charge. Yet they also have pressure from the board of directors. So everybody in the system has somebody to report to. Everybody in the system has somebody to influence. So what we say is we teach you skills for yourself. And then it's through those skills you can start to impact a few. And that's how most of this grows, is organically through, hey, this is good stuff. You should do this. And it's through that word of mouth. It's not through, sometimes we work with the HR team and this gets spread, top down. But in many organizations, this is spread organically. And it just starts with you. So I encourage you as a coach, as a leader, join one of our awareness workshops and just get to know it. Just a different way of thinking about scaling.
So what I'm hearing here is basically you're saying stop complaining and stop becoming a leader by yourself, and see the opportunities to spread that leadership around you so that it slowly grow beyond you. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, I'm saying maybe it's a both end. Yeah, go ahead and keep, complaining to the organization. Don't complain to me. Complain to the organization. Try to, come to these groups and just whine and get some help. But also change you and change what you're doing and see if that has a different response. So yeah, I think there's more than you can do than just, whine about it.
Yeah. So as we always say in coaching, you can't change somebody who don't want to code, who don't want to change. So
exactly. Right? Yeah, I've tried. I've been in a few of those coaching relationships where, it takes both sides to create change.
All right. Excellent. We are getting close to our time. And so, Pete, thank you so much for joining here and sharing your insights about leadership. I think in my personal opinion, that should be the next wave. After Scrum Master education, the leadership education should be the next wave to really this agile transformations going forward. I think it's a lot of work to do. And I think people like you should be leading that, and you are already. And I think that's great that you are speaking in our regional conference here. And thank you so much.
Yeah. Appreciate the invitation. Appreciate the audience and sharing your chat messages. And I just again encourage you to get involved in looking at what does Agile mean besides practices, besides scaling frameworks, and there's a whole nother space here that I believe is more impactful, getting to the we versus just the how do we do Agile. So thanks, Nanda, and thanks for the team, and we'll enjoy the rest of your conference.
All right, guys, I think it's time to go to your other next sessions, and also remember that there is a closing session you guys need to join. So just remember that, and 8:45 we'll see you there. So